Imagine standing before the most powerful military force the galaxy has ever known. Imagine their fleet commanders laughing as they announce your species' destruction. Now imagine responding not with fear, not with desperate pleas for mercy, but with a quiet smile and the simple act of opening a newspaper. What could humanity possibly know that an empire spanning 10,000 star systems doesn't? What secret lies hidden in those printed pages that transforms terror into confidence? What makes a single human diplomat smile in the face of certain annihilation? The Galactic Empire thought they knew everything about warfare. They thought they understood power. They thought humans were just another primitive species to be crushed beneath their endless fleets. They were wrong about everything. This is the story of how humanity's greatest strength was never their technology, never their weapons, and never their ships. It was something far more dangerous than any empire could imagine. Something that turned their declaration of war into the biggest mistake in galactic history. Something that made a human envoy smile and calmly read the morning news while the galaxy burned around him. The Empire wanted war. They just didn't realize they had already lost it before the first shot was fired. The massive doors of the Imperial Council chamber opened with a sound like thunder rolling across mountains. Ambassador Marcus Chen walked through them with his hands empty except for a folded newspaper tucked under his arm. His simple black suit stood out starkly against the golden walls covered in trophies from 1,000 conquered worlds. Behind him walked the delegation from Earth. 5 humans in business attire, carrying nothing more threatening than briefcases and tablet computers. They looked like accountants heading to a budget meeting, not representatives of a species about to face extinction. The chamber itself stretched higher than most skyscrapers. Floating platforms held the representatives of the Galactic Empire's ruling species. Each platform blazed with different colored lights, marking the home systems of races that controlled sectors spanning hundreds of star systems. The Zelanti with their 4 arms and crystal blue skin. The massive Gorbok whose thick hides could stop plasma bolts. The insectoid hive speakers whose compound eyes reflected the chamber lights like disco balls. At the center of it all sat the Emperor's voice, a being so genetically modified over centuries that his original species was impossible to determine. His skin shimmered between colors like oil on water, and, when he spoke, his words came out as harmonies that human ears could barely process. Humans of the Sol system, the voice proclaimed, and translation devices carried his words in over 300 languages. You stand accused of the highest crimes against galactic order. Marcus set his briefcase down and pulled out the newspaper, unfolding it with the casual air of someone settling in for a morning coffee. The paper was from Earth, dated 3 days ago. The headline read Local High School Wins State Basketball Championship. The voice continued his speech, but every eye in the chamber focused on the human ambassador reading sports scores while charged with crimes against the galaxy. Your species has violated the fundamental laws of expansion. You have established colonies without imperial permission. You have developed military technology beyond your classification level. You have refused to submit to imperial inspection teams. Marcus turned to page 2 of the newspaper. A recipe for apple pie caught his attention. His grandmother had made something similar, though she had used more cinnamon. These crimes carry only one sentence, the voice's harmonies grew sharper, more threatening. Complete annihilation. Your star will be collapsed. Your planets will be reduced to cosmic dust. Every trace of humanity will be erased from existence. The Zelanti delegation began a war chant that sounded like wine through crystal caves. The Gorvok stamped their feet in rhythm, making their platform shake. The hive speakers clicked their mandibles in unison, creating a sound like machine gun fire. Marcus found an interesting article about new developments in urban gardening and made a mental note to try growing tomatoes on his apartment balcony when he got home. Do you understand the charges brought against your species? The voice demanded. Marcus looked up from a crossword puzzle. Sorry, could you repeat that? I was reading about the weather forecast. Looks like rain this weekend. The entire chamber fell silent. Not even the background hum of anti-gravity generators made a sound. The voice's skin shifted through several rapid color changes. Are you reading while we pronounce your species' death sentence? Oh, the death sentence thing. Marcus folded the paper and set it on his briefcase. Yes, I heard that part. Very dramatic. Nice acoustics in here, by the way. He looked around the chamber approvingly. Must have cost a fortune to build. A Zelanti representative floated his platform closer. Human, do you not comprehend? We are declaring war on your entire species. War that will end in your complete destruction. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. I understand perfectly. You're declaring war on humanity. He smiled, and somehow that simple expression made the massive chamber feel smaller. That's quite interesting, actually. Interesting? The Gorvok delegate's voice boomed like an avalanche. You find your extinction interesting? Oh, not our extinction. That's not going to happen. Marcus waved a hand dismissively. No, what's interesting is that you think declaring war on us is your decision to make. The Emperor's voice leaned forward on his throne. Explain. Marcus reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small device that looked like a smartphone. He pressed a button, and a hologram appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed a star map of the local galaxy, with tiny lights marking inhabited systems. This is the Galactic Empire, Marcus said, gesturing to thousands of glowing points. Very impressive. 12,000 star systems under your control. Quadrillions of beings serving your rule. Military fleets that could glass entire solar systems. He pressed another button. Red dots appeared scattered throughout the map. Not many at first glance, but they were everywhere. Every sector, every major trade route, every strategic system had at least one red dot near it. These are human colonies. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted in dozens of languages. Platform lights flashed warning colors. The hive speakers' clicking became a thunderous roar. Impossible, the voices' harmonies cracked. Our surveys show only one human system. Sol. 3 planets, barely industrialized. Population of 15 billion primitives. Marcus smiled again. Your surveys are very good. Sol does have 15 billion people. Give or take a few million. We're not great at census taking. He gestured to the hologram. But, see, the thing about humans is we're curious. We like to explore. We like to see what's over the next hill, around the next corner, past the next star. More red dots appeared on the map. Then, more. The scattered points became clusters, the clusters became networks, the networks became a web of connections stretching across the entire galaxy. How long? The voice whispered. How long what? How long have you been spreading without our knowledge? Marcus consulted his watch. Well, depending on how you count it, either 300 years or about 15 minutes. That makes no sense. Doesn't it? Marcus pressed another button on his device. See, 300 years ago, humanity developed faster than light travel. Not the big, flashy kind you folks use with your massive ships and spatial tiers. We developed something quieter. Smaller. Ships the size of school buses that could slip between stars without anyone noticing. The hologram zoomed in on one system, showing a gas giant with dozens of moons. Several red dots clustered around it. We didn't build big colonies at first. A few hundred people here, a research station there, maybe a mining operation on an asteroid. Nothing that would show up on your long-range scans. Nothing that looked threatening. Another Gorvok delegate spoke up. Even if this is true, scattered settlements cannot threaten the Empire. We have fleets. We have weapons that can shatter planets. That's true, Marcus agreed. Your weapons are very impressive. Planet crackers, star killers, antimatter bombs the size of buildings. Really nasty stuff. He looked thoughtful. Of course, those weapons work great when you can see your enemy coming. When you know where to shoot. The hologram changed, showing shipping lanes between stars. Every major trade route had red dots positioned near jump points, fuel stations, and navigation beacons. The thing is, you built your empire on the assumption that space is big and empty, and anybody trying to move through it would need the same kind of massive infrastructure you use. Big ships, big fleets, big obvious targets that your sensors can spot from light years away. Marcus walked closer to the center of the chamber, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. But humans have this weird habit of going places we're not supposed to go. We climb mountains because they're there. We explore caves just to see what's inside. We send tiny robots to other planets to take pictures of rocks. The star map rotated, showing the galaxy from a different angle. The red dots formed patterns now, networks that connected every major system in the Empire. So while you were building your fleets and conquering planets, we were building something else. We were building a web. A Zelante delegate found her voice. What kind of web? Communication networks. Supply lines. Transit stations. Observation posts. Marcus's smile grew wider. Weapons platforms. The red dots on the map began pulsing in sequence, like Christmas lights blinking on and off. See, the really interesting thing about a web is that it looks fragile from the outside. Just thin little strands connected to each other. But, try to break one strand, and you discover that every other strand is connected to it. Break enough strands, and the whole web shakes. The pulsing dots synchronized, all flashing at the same moment. And, sometimes, if you shake the web hard enough, the spider notices. The chamber's main display screen activated, showing an incoming transmission. A woman in a crisp military uniform appeared, standing on what looked like a ship's bridge. Behind her, displays showed tactical information and star charts. Admiral Sarah Chen, First Fleet, she announced. We've been monitoring this transmission. Ambassador Chen, are you all right down there? Marcus waved at the screen. Hi, sis. I'm fine. They're being very dramatic about wanting to kill everyone. Copy that. Should we proceed with the demonstration? The Emperor's voice found his harmonies again. What demonstration? Marcus turned back to the assembled delegates. Oh, did I forget to mention? When I said you declaring war on us was interesting, it was because you can't declare war on someone you're already fighting. The main screen split into dozens of smaller displays. Each one showed a different location, a different star system, a different Imperial facility. All of them had the same thing in common: they were under attack by small, fast human ships that seemed to appear from nowhere. You see, Marcus continued conversationally, while you were giving your very impressive speech about destroying humanity, my sister's fleet was implementing Operation Spiderweb. Human forces are currently engaging Imperial facilities at approximately 2,000 locations throughout the galaxy. A hive speaker delegate made a sound like breaking glass. Impossible. Our sensors show no large fleet movements. No human armadas. That's because we don't use large fleets, Admiral Chen's voice came from the speakers. We use small units, fast strikes, and perfect coordination. While you were looking for armies, we were already inside your house. The displays showed Imperial supply convoys being hit by quick attacks. Space stations going dark as their power systems were sabotaged. Communication relays failing one by one. Marcus picked up his newspaper again. The thing about humans is we really don't like bullies. And we especially don't like being told we're going to be wiped out for the crime of existing. He found his place in the crossword puzzle. So we came up with a plan. What plan? The voice demanded. Well, it's pretty simple, really. You want to destroy humanity? Go ahead and try. But, while you're trying, we're going to cut every supply line you have, destroy every communication network you use, and strand your fleet so far from home that they'll run out of fuel before they can hurt anyone. The tactical display showed more attacks, more systems going offline. The pattern became clear: humans weren't trying to hold territory or destroy everything they found. They were specifically targeting infrastructure, the networks that held the Empire together. Your empire spans 12,000 star systems, Marcus continued. But, it only works because you can move ships, supplies, and information between those systems. Cut the connections, and you don't have an empire. You have 12,000 isolated planets with no way to help each other. A new voice came from the speakers, calm and professional. This is Admiral Rodriguez, Second Fleet. All primary hyperspace beacon arrays in sectors 7 through 12 are now offline. Imperial forces in those regions are effectively stranded. Another voice followed. Admiral Okafor, Third Fleet. Commercial shipping has been halted on all major trade routes in the galactic northeast. Supply convoys are dead in space. The Emperor's voice stood up from his throne, his skin cycling through rapid color changes. This is impossible. How could you coordinate attacks across the entire galaxy without us detecting your communications? Marcus looked up from his newspaper again. Oh, that's the really clever part. We're not using communications. Then, how are you coordinating? Time zones. The entire chamber stared at him. Marcus set down the paper and walked over to the holographic map. See, the thing about space is that it's really, really big. Light takes time to travel between stars, which means information takes time to travel. If you want to coordinate anything across galactic distances, you need either faster-than-light communication, which is expensive and easy to jam, or you need to plan everything in advance and use synchronized timing. He pointed to different sections of the map. Every human unit knows exactly when to strike their targets based on their local time zones. No communications needed. No signals for you to intercept. Just very precise clocks and very detailed planning. Admiral Chen's voice came from the speakers again. We've been planning this for about 50 years, actually. Ever since we realized the Empire might eventually notice us and decide we were a threat. The Gorvok delegate who had spoken earlier slammed his fist on his platform controls. Even if you can disrupt our supply lines, you cannot hold this territory. Our fleets will adapt. We will hunt down your forces and destroy them. Will you? Marcus pulled out his phone again and pressed another button. The holographic map changed, showing the current positions of Imperial fleets throughout the galaxy. Let's see. Your first armada is currently in the Vega sector, about 3 weeks from the nearest supply depot, which we destroyed 20 minutes ago. Your second armada is protecting the capital worlds, but their fuel convoys are all dead in space. Your third armada is trying to respond to our attacks in the Outer Rim, but they're moving blind because we knocked out their long-range sensors. Red indicators appeared next to each fleet position, showing supply levels dropping in real time. The beautiful thing about space combat is that it's really just logistics with weapons attached. You can have the biggest, most powerful ships in the galaxy, but if they can't refuel, they become very expensive floating sculptures. A new alarm sounded in the chamber. A technician at a communication console turned toward the Emperor's voice. Your Magnificence, we're receiving priority emergency signals from fleet commanders across the galaxy. All report critical supply shortages and request immediate resupply. The voice's harmonies became discordant. How many signals? All of them, sir. Every fleet is reporting the same issues. Marcus nodded approvingly. That's actually ahead of schedule. Sarah must have been working overtime. He looked directly at the Emperor's voice. So, about this war you wanted to declare. I'm afraid it's going to be rather one-sided. The chamber erupted again. Delegates shouted demands, accusations, and threats. Platform lights flashed emergency colors. The sound became so chaotic that the translation systems gave up and simply broadcast static. Marcus calmly sat down on the steps leading to the central platform, opened his newspaper again, and began reading an article about a local farmer who had grown a prize-winning pumpkin. Through the chaos, Admiral Chen's voice cut clear and calm. Imperial delegates, this is Admiral Chen of the Human Defense Fleet. You have 5 minutes to begin discussing surrender terms, or we move to Phase 2 of our operation. The shouting gradually died down. The Emperor's voice looked older somehow, his shimmering skin dulled to a flat gray. What is Phase 2? Marcus looked up from an article about school lunch programs. Phase 2? Oh, that's when we stop being nice about this. You call this being nice? We're disabling your infrastructure, not destroying it. We're stranding your fleets, not blowing them up. We're cutting your supply lines, not poisoning your food. Marcus's expression became serious for the first time. We could have made this conversation very different. We could have started by demonstrating what happens when humans really want something dead. He stood up and walked back to the center of the chamber. But we didn't do that, because humans don't actually like killing people. We're really quite fond of life, generally speaking. We'd much rather convince you that fighting us is a bad idea than actually fight you. The holographic map changed again, showing new information. Every Imperial world now had additional markers indicating human assets, monitoring stations, supply caches, and other installations that had been hidden for decades. The truth is, we've been preparing for this conversation for a very long time. We knew eventually someone would notice that humans were spreading across the galaxy without permission. We knew eventually someone would decide we were a threat that needed to be eliminated. Marcus looked around the chamber, making eye contact with delegates from every platform. So we prepared. We built networks. We positioned assets. We made plans. And, most importantly, we made sure that anyone who decided to threaten humanity would discover that they had made a very serious mistake. The Emperor's voice sat heavily on his throne. What do you want? Marcus picked up his briefcase and folded his newspaper. What we want is very simple. We want to be left alone to live our lives, explore the galaxy, and see what's out there. We want the same rights to exist that you've given to every other species in the Empire. And, in return? In return, we'll restore your supply lines, release your fleets, and pretend this whole unpleasant conversation never happened. Marcus smiled one more time. We might even be willing to share some of our smaller ship technology. I imagine it could be quite useful for exploring places your big fleets can't reach. The chamber fell quiet except for the hum of life support systems. Finally, the Emperor's voice spoke. We need time to discuss this. Of course. Marcus headed toward the chamber doors. Take all the time you need. Just remember, every minute you spend discussing is another minute your fleets are running out of fuel. As the human delegation reached the doors, Marcus paused and turned back. Oh, and, just so we're clear about something. This conversation happened because you threatened us. But, humanity has been watching the Empire for a very long time. We've seen how you treat species that resist your expansion. We've seen what happens to worlds that refuse to submit. His expression hardened. We decided a long time ago that we would never let that happen to us. Today was just us being polite about it. The doors closed behind the humans with another sound like thunder, leaving the most powerful governing body in the galaxy sitting in stunned silence, staring at displays showing their empire falling apart in real time. On his platform, the Emperor's voice looked down at the communication console where emergency signals continued to pour in from stranded fleets across the galaxy. For the first time in 3,000 years of Imperial expansion, someone had said no. And, somehow, that simple word had just changed everything. The private council chamber was smaller than the grand audience hall, but no less impressive. Ancient weapons from conquered civilizations lined the walls, and the floor was made from polished stone taken from the first world the Empire had claimed 3 millennia ago. Around a circular table sat the 12 most powerful beings in the known galaxy, each representing one of the founding species of the Galactic Empire. The Emperor's voice sat at the head of the table, his skin a dull gray that reflected his mood. Floating holographic displays showed the ongoing chaos across Imperial space. Red warning lights blinked on star charts, indicating systems that had gone silent. Fleet positions updated in real time, showing thousands of ships stranded without fuel or supplies. Report, the voice commanded. Admiral Thexbar of the Gorvok Navy stood to attention, his massive frame making the chamber seem smaller. The situation is catastrophic, Your Magnificence. In the past 4 hours, we have lost communication with 60% of our outer rim installations. Supply convoys throughout the galaxy have been destroyed or disabled. Our fleets report fuel reserves dropping below critical levels. A Zelanti counselor named Velnaris floated her chair closer to the table. How is this possible? Our intelligence networks detected no human fleet movements, no massive military buildup. Where did they hide an army large enough to strike across the entire galaxy? That's just it, Admiral Thexbar said grimly. They didn't use an army. Our battle damage assessments show attacks by small units, sometimes as few as 3 or 4 ships per target. The humans appear to have achieved galactic-scale coordination using minimal forces. Counselor Keth 9 of the Hive Collective clicked his mandibles in agitation. Minimal forces cannot achieve such results. There must be some deception, some hidden fleet we have not detected. The voice gestured to one of the floating displays. Show them the tactical analysis from the Arcturus incident. The display expanded to show a detailed recreation of one attack. An Imperial supply convoy of 12 massive cargo ships escorted by 6 destroyers moved through hyperspace. Suddenly, 3 small human vessels appeared as if from nowhere, moving faster than the sensors could track. Within minutes, all cargo ships were disabled and the destroyers were forced to retreat. The human vessels used no weapons we recognize, Admiral Thexbar continued. Instead of destroying our ships, they seemed to simply turn them off. Power systems failed, engines stopped working, communication arrays went dead. Our crews reported that ship systems simply began shutting down in sequence as if commanded to do so. Velnaris studied the tactical display. They have some form of cyber warfare capability we don't understand. It's worse than that, said a new voice. Counselor Drakmar of the Saurian Republic gestured to another display showing multiple attack sites. Look at the timing. Every attack happened within a 2-hour window, despite being spread across thousands of light years. Perfect coordination without any detectable communication signals. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Keth9's clicking became rapid and agitated. If they can coordinate attacks across the galaxy without communication, and if they can disable our ships without destroying them, then our entire military doctrine is obsolete. The voice's skin flickered with brief flashes of color before returning to gray. The human ambassador mentioned something about time zones. Admiral Fexvar, what is your assessment of this claim? The Gorvok admiral consulted his datapad. Based on our analysis, it appears the humans planned this operation in advance with extraordinary precision. Each unit knew exactly when to strike based on their local galactic coordinates and a synchronized timing system. No real-time coordination was necessary because every detail was predetermined. How far in advance? Based on the complexity of the operation, our analysts estimate the planning phase required a minimum of 50 standard years. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft humming of the chamber's environmental systems. Finally, Velnaris spoke. They planned this for 50 years. 50 years of watching us, studying our systems, positioning their forces, waiting for us to make this exact threat. Drakmar leaned forward. The question is, what else have they planned for? A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message. The voice activated his personal communication system. Your Magnificence, came the voice of his chief intelligence advisor, we have an update from our deep space monitoring stations. You need to see this immediately. Display it here. The central hologram changed to show a three-dimensional map of the galaxy with time markers running along the bottom. As they watched, red dots appeared throughout Imperial space, but not randomly. The attacks followed a pattern that became clear as time progressed. The humans didn't just attack randomly, the intelligence advisor explained. They started with our most isolated facilities and worked inward, systematically cutting communication and supply lines in a precise sequence. Each wave of attacks made the next wave easier by isolating our forces. The pattern was beautiful in its simplicity. Like a surgeon cutting nerves to paralyze a limb, the humans had severed the connections that held the Empire together. Keth9's mandibles clacked together sharply. This level of strategic planning suggests intelligence capabilities far beyond what we attributed to their species. Or, said Velnaris quietly, it suggests they've been studying us much longer than we realized. The voice activated another communication channel. Intelligence Division, I want a full review of all human contact records for the past 3 centuries. Everything. Trade agreements, exploration permits, cultural exchanges, everything. Already underway, Your Magnificence. Preliminary findings are disturbing. Explain. Human exploration vessels have been requesting passage through Imperial space for over 200 years. We granted these requests because the ships appeared to be small scientific vessels conducting harmless research. However, these ships visited virtually every major system in the Empire, often multiple times. The display changed to show the paths taken by registered human exploration ships over the past 2 centuries. The routes formed a comprehensive map of Imperial infrastructure, military bases, supply depots, and communication networks. They were mapping us, Drakmar said slowly. For 200 years, they were systematically mapping every critical system in the Empire. It gets worse, the intelligence advisor continued. Many of these exploration ships requested extended research permits, allowing them to remain in systems for months at a time. During these extended stays, they would have had ample opportunity to study our technology, our procedures, our security protocols. Admiral Fexvar felt his stomach sink. They didn't just map our infrastructure. They studied how it worked. They learned our weaknesses. The voice's skin began cycling through rapid color changes, a sign of extreme agitation. How many systems did they visit? All of them, Your Magnificence. Over the past 2 centuries, human research vessels have visited every major Imperial system at least once. Most were visited multiple times. The room erupted in angry voices as the counselors realized the magnitude of what had happened. 200 years. Velnaris's voice rose to a crystal shriek. They've been spying on us for 200 years. And we helped them do it, Drakmar added bitterly. We gave them permits. We provided them with navigation data. We welcomed them as harmless scientists. Kef9's clicking became a continuous rattle. The entire time, they were preparing for war. No, said the voice quietly, and his tone made everyone stop arguing. Not preparing for war. Preparing for this exact moment. He gestured to the tactical display still showing the systematic dismantling of Imperial logistics. They weren't planning to attack us. They were planning to defend themselves. Everything they've done suggests they expected us to threaten them eventually. The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Admiral Fexbar spoke slowly. If they could predict that we would eventually see them as a threat worthy of extinction, then they know us better than we know ourselves, Valneris finished. Another chime indicated an incoming message. This time, it was Admiral Chen's face that appeared on the display. Imperial Council, she said with professional courtesy, I hope you've had time to review the current tactical situation. I'm calling to discuss next steps. The voice leaned forward. Admiral Chen. Your demonstration has been effective. I'm glad you think so. Though I should point out that what you've seen so far is just a small sample of our capabilities. The human admiral's expression was calm but serious. We've been very careful to avoid causing casualties or permanent damage to Imperial infrastructure. We could have made this much worse. What do you want us to do? What we want is simple: formal recognition of human sovereignty over our existing territories, and agreement to non-interference in future human expansion. Drakmar leaned into view of the camera. And if we refuse? Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes became colder. Then, we moved to less polite methods of persuasion. Such as demonstrating what happens when humans stop trying to avoid casualties. The display split to show a new feed from one of the Imperial Navy's most secure facilities, the Nexus shipyard in the Centaurus sector, where the Empire's largest and most powerful warships were constructed. The Nexus shipyard is currently protected by the 7th Fleet, Admiral Chen continued. 48 capital ships, 200 escorts, defensive platforms, and enough firepower to glass a planet. It's considered impregnable. The view showed the massive shipyard complex floating in space, surrounded by the impressive bulk of the 7th Fleet. Then, without warning, tiny objects appeared throughout the fleet formation. They moved impossibly fast, weaving between ships that tried desperately to target them. What you're seeing, Admiral Chen explained, is a single human stealth corvette demonstrating our target acquisition capabilities. As they watched, every ship in the 7th Fleet was tagged with a bright blue marker beam. 48 capital ships. 200 escorts. Hundreds of defensive platforms. All marked in the space of 30 seconds. Those markers represent weapons locks, Admiral Chen continued. If we wanted those ships destroyed, they would already be space debris. The blue markers faded, and the tiny human ship vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. The council chamber was dead silent. The 7th Fleet didn't even see us coming, Admiral Chen noted. Their sensors are still trying to figure out what happened. Would you like to see another demonstration? That won't be necessary, the voice said quickly. I hope not. But I want you to understand something very important. Admiral Chen's expression became more serious. Everything you've seen today represents humanity's peaceful response to your threat. We disable rather than destroy. We strand rather than slaughter. We demonstrate rather than devastate. She paused to let that sink in. If you force us to respond less peacefully, you won't like the results. Valneris found her voice. How long have you been capable of this level of military action? We've been capable of destroying the Imperial Navy for about 60 years, Admiral Chen replied matter-of-factly. We've been capable of crippling Imperial logistics for about 80 years. We've been capable of preventing Imperial expansion into human territory for about a century. Then, why didn't you? Admiral Chen smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. Because up until 4 hours ago, you hadn't threatened to commit genocide against our species. Admiral Fexbar stepped forward. If you could have stopped us at any time, why allow the Empire to threaten other species? Who says we allowed it? Admiral Chen's smile became sharper. Did you ever wonder why your expansion slowed down about 70 years ago? Why certain sectors became difficult to pacify. Why some species proved surprisingly effective at resisting Imperial conquest. The counselors exchanged shocked glances. You've been interfering with our expansion for 70 years? Drakmar demanded. Let's just say that when the Empire decides to exterminate an entire species for the crime of existing, humanity tends to take an interest in the situation. Keth9's clicking became agitated. How many species have you helped? That's classified. But, I will say that several species you believe you conquered are actually still very much free. They just convinced you that resistance was futile and, you had one. The voice's skin began cycling through colors again. This is impossible. Our intelligence networks would have detected such interference. Your intelligence networks detected what we wanted them to detect, Admiral Chen replied. Humans are very good at making things look the way we want them to look. She gestured to someone off camera, and the display changed to show a map of Imperial expansion over the past century. Areas the Empire believed it controlled were marked in Imperial colors, but substantial sections flickered to show different allegiances. The green areas are species that successfully resisted Imperial conquest with human assistance, Admiral Chen explained. The yellow areas are species that pretend to be Imperial subjects while actually maintaining their independence. The red areas are human territories you don't know about. The map looked like a patchwork quilt. What the Empire had believed was solid Imperial control turned out to be a complex web of independent territories, hidden resistances, and concealed human expansion. Your empire is about half the size you think it is, Admiral Chen continued. And it's been that way for decades. The silence in the council chamber stretched on for long minutes. Finally, the voice spoke. What are your terms? Simple. Formal recognition of human sovereignty over all territories we currently control. Agreement to non-interference in future human expansion. And withdrawal of all threats against human civilian populations. And, in return? In return, we stop dismantling your supply networks. We help you re-establish communication with your stranded fleets. And, we go back to pretending that you're in charge of everything you think you control. Velnaris leaned forward. And if we agree to these terms, how do we know you won't simply expand your interference with Imperial operations? Admiral Chen's expression became thoughtful. That's an interesting question. Let me ask you something in return. In the past 70 years that we've been interfering with Imperial expansion, how many Imperial civilian populations have been harmed by human actions? The counselors looked at each other uncertainly. The answer is 0, Admiral Chen continued. Despite our ability to cripple your military and disrupt your economy, we have never targeted Imperial civilian populations. Despite our ability to destroy your fleets, we disable them instead. Despite our ability to assassinate Imperial leaders, all of you are still alive and unharmed. She leaned forward slightly. Humans don't want to rule the galaxy. We don't want to destroy the Empire. We don't want to commit genocide against Imperial species. We just want the same right to exist and expand that you've given to everyone else. Admiral Fexmar spoke slowly. And if we agree to coexist? Then, we continue doing what we've been doing for the past century, exploring the galaxy, building our communities, helping species that ask for our help, and staying out of Imperial politics. But, you would retain the capability to respond if threatened again? Admiral Chen's smile returned. Oh yes. We're very good at learning from experience. And, we have very long memories. The voice looked around the table at his fellow counselors. Each face reflected the same realization: they had just discovered that their empire was built on an illusion, and the species they had tried to exterminate was far more dangerous than any enemy they had ever faced. We need time to consider these terms, the voice said. Of course. Take all the time you need. Admiral Chen consulted something off camera. Though I should mention that your fleets currently have about 18 hours of fuel remaining at current consumption rates. After that, well, I'm sure you can work out the implications. The transmission ended, leaving the council in darkness except for the soft glow of the tactical displays showing their empire coming apart in real time. Drakmar was the first to speak. We don't actually have a choice, do we? No, said the voice quietly. We don't. Velnaris's voice was barely audible. How did we miss this? How did we fail to understand what we were dealing with? Admiral Fexvar looked at the star charts showing human territories scattered throughout what they had thought was Imperial space. Because we looked at them and saw what we expected to see. A young species, limited technology, small population. We saw primitives. What should we have seen? Keth9 asked. The Admiral pointed to the display showing 2 centuries of human exploration missions that had systematically mapped every aspect of Imperial infrastructure. We should have seen predators. Patient, careful, intelligent predators who spent 200 years learning everything there was to know about their potential enemies before deciding whether those enemies posed a threat worth neutralizing. The voice's skin had settled into a steady, dull gray. Call a vote. All in favor of accepting the human terms? Every hand around the table rose without hesitation. Motion carries unanimously. The voice activated his communication system. Admiral Chen, the Imperial Council accepts your terms. How do we proceed? Admiral Chen's face reappeared on the display. Thank you. That was the right choice. I'll have Ambassador Chen contact you in 6 hours with the details of our formal agreement. In the meantime, we'll begin restoring your supply lines and communication networks. Admiral, the voice said, may I ask you something? Of course. How long have you known that this conversation would happen? Admiral Chen smiled. Ambassador Chen predicted this exact scenario about 40 years ago. He said eventually someone would notice that humanity was expanding without permission and decide we needed to be stopped. He spent most of his career preparing for this day. And the plan we saw implemented today? Has been rehearsed in simulation thousands of times. Every human unit that participated in today's operations has been training for this specific scenario for years. The voice's skin flickered with what might have been admiration. Your species is remarkably thorough. We have to be. The galaxy is full of species with bigger fleets, better weapons, and more powerful technology. Our only advantage is that we think ahead. As the transmission ended, the counselors sat in contemplative silence, each processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. The Galactic Empire, the most powerful political entity in known space, had just been outmaneuvered by a species they had barely considered worth noticing. And, somehow, despite having been completely defeated, they all felt lucky to have survived the encounter. 6 hours after the Imperial Council's surrender, Ambassador Marcus Chen sat in a small cafe aboard Station Harmony, humanity's hidden diplomatic outpost in the Vega sector. The station existed in the shadow of a massive asteroid, invisible to Imperial sensors and officially non-existent according to every galactic registry. The cafe served real coffee from Earth, a luxury that cost more than most people made in a year, but Marcus figured he had earned it. Across from him sat Dr. Elena Vasquez, the architect of humanity's greatest secret, the Shadow Network. Elena didn't look like someone who had just orchestrated the peaceful conquest of the galaxy's largest empire. She looked like a university professor, which she had been before humanity discovered they weren't alone in the universe. Wire-rimmed glasses, graying hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and a sweater that had seen better days. I have to admit, Marcus said, stirring sugar into his coffee, watching the Empire realize they'd been outplayed was almost worth 40 years of preparation. Elena smiled over her tea. Almost? Okay, it was completely worth it. Did you see the Emperor's voice when we showed him the real scope of our network? I thought his skin was going to cycle through the entire color spectrum. The Gorvok Admiral's expression was better, Elena replied. When he realized their impregnable shipyard had been tagged by a single corvette, I could practically see his worldview collapsing. Marcus leaned back in his chair, finally, allowing himself to relax for the first time in months. Through the cafe's windows, he could see other human ships docked at the station. Not the tiny scout ships the Empire knew about, but the real fleet, vessels that represented 3 centuries of human engineering advancement, built in secret shipyards and armed with weapons the Empire couldn't imagine. So, Marcus said, want to tell me how you actually pulled this off? I know the official story, but I'm curious about the details the Council doesn't know. Elena set down her tea and activated a small holographic projector. The device showed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy, but this one was different from anything the Empire had ever seen. Instead of the clean territorial boundaries Imperial maps showed, this display revealed the true structure of galactic civilization. It started with a simple observation, Elena began. When we first developed faster-than-light travel and discovered the Empire, everyone assumed we had two choices: submit to their authority or be destroyed by their military. The map zoomed in on human space, showing the early colony ships spreading out from Sol. But I had spent my career studying network theory, and I realized there was a third option. Instead of trying to compete with the Empire's strengths, we could exploit their weaknesses. Which were size and complexity. Elena gestured to the map, and red lines appeared connecting Imperial worlds. The Empire spans thousands of star systems, but it only works because of the networks that connect them. Communication networks, supply networks, transportation networks. Remove those networks, and the Empire becomes just a collection of isolated planets. Marcus nodded. So you decided to build a counter-network? Not exactly. We decided to become the network. The map changed, showing humanity's actual expansion over the past 3 centuries. Instead of the scattered colonies the Empire knew about, the display revealed a web of interconnected settlements that stretched throughout Imperial space. Every time we requested permission to establish a research station or a mining operation in Imperial territory, we were actually building another node in our network. Small, discrete, seemingly unimportant facilities that were actually sophisticated intelligence and logistics hubs. The scope of it was breathtaking. Thousands of hidden installations, each one positioned to monitor Imperial activities or support human operations. Together, they formed a shadow infrastructure that paralleled and, in some cases, surpassed the Empire's own networks. The brilliance wasn't in hiding from the Empire, Elena continued. It was in hiding in plain sight. We built our network using the Empire's own bureaucracy and regulations. Every installation was properly licensed, regularly inspected, and completely legal according to Imperial law. Marcus laughed. We bureaucratized our way to galactic dominance. In a sense, yes. But there was more to it than paperwork. Elena pressed a control, and the map showed different types of installations in different colors. We didn't just build monitoring stations. We built an entire parallel civilization. Blue dots indicated communication relays that allowed humans to coordinate across the galaxy without using Imperial networks. Green dots showed supply depots that could support human operations for months without external resupply. Yellow dots marked shipyards where humanity's real fleet was constructed, far from Imperial eyes. This is incredible, Marcus said, studying the display. How did you keep all of this secret? Compartmentalization and misdirection. Every human installation had a legitimate cover function that provided real value to the local Imperial authorities. A mining operation that actually mined valuable minerals. A research station that actually conducted useful scientific research. A repair facility that actually serviced Imperial ships. Elena zoomed in on one system to show the details. Take the Altair station, for example. Officially, it's a xenobiology research facility studying the local ecosystem. The station has published hundreds of peer-reviewed papers and trained thousands of Imperial scientists over the past century. The display showed the station's official layout: laboratories, living quarters, administrative facilities. But here's what the Empire never saw. The layout shifted, revealing hidden sections. Beneath the research facilities is a communication hub that can coordinate operations across 3 sectors. The equipment storage areas actually contain military supplies for 1,000 human operatives. The waste processing plant is actually a manufacturing facility producing advanced weapons. Marcus shook his head in amazement. You built an entire secret military-industrial complex right under their noses. We built dozens of them. And we staffed them with humans who genuinely were qualified researchers, engineers, and administrators. People who could do their cover jobs competently while supporting our real mission. How many people were involved? Elena consulted her display. Active operatives? About 50,000 humans scattered across the galaxy, all of them living double lives as Imperial citizens while maintaining loyalty to humanity. That's a lot of secrets to keep. It helped that most of them didn't know the full scope of what we were building. Each operative knew their specific mission and enough context to do their job effectively, but only a few dozen people knew the complete picture. Marcus thought about this. Including my sister, obviously. Admiral Chen was one of the primary architects of our military planning. She spent 30 years developing the operational doctrine that we implemented today. Elena smiled. Your performance in the council chamber was impressive, by the way. You really sold the role of the casual diplomat who just happened to know about our capabilities. Years of practice. Though I have to admit, I wasn't entirely acting. There's something deeply satisfying about watching bullies realize they've picked a fight with the wrong target. Elena's expression became more serious. That's actually important to remember. What we did today wasn't just a military victory. It was a psychological one. The Empire's entire authority structure is based on the assumption that they are the dominant force in the galaxy. By demonstrating that we could disable their infrastructure at will, we fundamentally changed that dynamic. How so? Think about it from the perspective of other species in the Empire. For 3,000 years, Imperial expansion has seemed inevitable. Resistance has seemed futile. Species that couldn't match the Empire's military power had no choice but to submit. Elena gestured to the galactic map, which now showed areas of resistance activity in green. But, if a species like humanity, which the Empire barely noticed, can bring Imperial logistics to a standstill in a few hours, what does that say about Imperial invincibility? Marcus began to understand. Other species are going to start wondering if resistance is actually possible. Exactly. And, some of them are going to start asking us for help. The map changed to show communication intercepts from across the galaxy. Messages in dozens of languages, all asking variations of the same question: how did humanity do it? We've received over 300 covert inquiries in the past 6 hours, Elena continued. Species that have been planning resistance movements for decades want to know if we can provide support. Species that submitted to Imperial rule generations ago want to know if independence is possible. Marcus felt a chill. That could destabilize the entire galaxy. It could. Or it could lead to a more balanced political structure. The Empire has been the sole superpower for so long that everyone forgot there could be alternatives. Elena stood and walked to the cafe window, looking out at the human ships docked outside. The truth is, today was just the beginning. What we demonstrated to the Empire was our defensive capability. What we haven't shown anyone yet is what we can do when we decide to be proactive. She activated another display, this one showing human expansion projections for the next century. With the Empire no longer able to restrict our growth, humanity can finally expand openly. We have the technology to terraform marginal worlds, the logistics network to support rapid colonization, and the military capability to defend our territories. Marcus joined her at the window. How big could we get? Conservative estimates suggest we could establish viable colonies in over 10,000 systems within 50 years. That would make humanity the largest single species in the galaxy. The implications were staggering. In less than a century, humans could go from being an unnoticed minor species to being the dominant force in galactic politics. But, Elena continued, size isn't the same as influence. The real question is what we do with that growth. What do you mean? Elena turned back to the displays, showing the ongoing requests for assistance from oppressed species throughout Imperial space. We could use our capabilities to become just another empire, ruling through force and intimidation. Or we could use them to create something different. A galaxy where species cooperate voluntarily instead of being forced to submit. Marcus considered this. You're talking about fundamentally changing how galactic civilization works. I'm talking about giving other species the same choice we just demanded for ourselves, the right to exist independently and expand according to their own interests. That's a noble goal, but it's also incredibly ambitious. Changing a political structure that has existed for 3 millennia won't be easy. Elena smiled. 3 months ago, everyone thought challenging the Imperial Navy was impossible. This morning, we disabled their entire logistics network in 2 hours. I'm beginning to think impossible is just another word for requires more planning. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Elena activated the communication system, and Admiral Chen's face appeared on the display. Dr. Vasquez, Ambassador Chen. I hope you're enjoying your coffee break, because we have a situation developing. What kind of situation? Marcus asked. The good kind, actually. We're receiving formal requests for diplomatic contact from 47 different species, including some that the Empire considers fully integrated Imperial citizens. Apparently, news of today's events is spreading faster than we anticipated. Elena leaned forward. How are the Imperial authorities responding? That's the interesting part. They're not. Near as we can tell, Imperial command structure is still trying to figure out how to explain today's events to their own people. They haven't issued any public statements about what happened. Marcus grinned. They can't figure out how to admit they were outmaneuvered by a species they barely considered a threat. Exactly. Which gives us a window of opportunity to establish relationships with species that want to explore alternatives to Imperial rule. Elena studied the diplomatic requests scrolling across the display. Admiral, what's your assessment of the military situation? Can the Empire still threaten these species if they decide to pursue independence? Short answer, not effectively. Longer answer, the Empire's military is designed for large-scale fleet actions and planetary invasions. It's not designed for managing dozens of simultaneous independence movements spread across the galaxy. Especially not when those movements have access to our support networks. The implications were clear. By demonstrating that the Empire could be challenged, humanity had opened the door for every oppressed species in the galaxy to reconsider their options. There's something else, Admiral Chen continued. Our monitoring stations are detecting increased activity in the Outer Rim territories. Species that we thought were extinct or fully assimilated are suddenly reactivating old communication networks. Elena's eyes widened. They preserved their infrastructure in secret? Looks like it. The Altari Resistance Network just came online after being dark for over a century. The Vex Collective is coordinating across 3 sectors. Even the synthetics are establishing contact protocols. Marcus felt a mix of excitement and concern. This could get out of hand quickly. Or, Elena said thoughtfully, it could be exactly what the galaxy needs. For 3,000 years, the Empire has maintained order through suppression. Maybe it's time to try maintaining order through cooperation. Admiral Chen nodded. That's actually what I wanted to discuss with you. We're going to need to make some decisions about how to respond to these diplomatic requests. Do we provide military support? Economic assistance? Just intelligence and coordination? Elena looked at the galactic map, studying the distribution of species requesting contact. All of the above, but carefully. We don't want to destabilize everything at once. Some species might be ready for full independence, others might just want protection from Imperial retaliation. We'll need to assess each situation individually. Agreed. But we'll need to move fast. The longer the Empire has to adapt to the new situation, the more difficult this becomes. Marcus activated another display, showing Imperial fleet movements over the past 6 hours. The good news is that the Empire is still trying to deal with their immediate logistics problems. Most of their fleets are focused on getting to refueling stations, not suppressing rebellions. How long do we have? Elena asked. Admiral Chen consulted something off-camera. Based on fuel consumption rates and our monitoring of Imperial communications, I'd say we have about a week before they can mount any kind of coordinated response to independence movements. A week to reshape galactic politics, Marcus mused. No pressure. Elena was already working with her displays, organizing the diplomatic requests by priority and location. Actually, I think a week might be enough. Not to finish the process, but to get enough momentum going that the Empire can't stop it. She highlighted clusters of species in different sectors. If we can establish 3 or 4 successful independence movements in strategic locations, they become examples for other species to follow. The Empire can't be everywhere at once, especially not with their logistics networks compromised. What about retaliation? Marcus asked. The Empire has a long history of making examples of species that resist their authority. Admiral Chen's expression became grim. That's where we come in. Any Imperial force that attempts to punish a species for pursuing independence will discover that they're suddenly dealing with humanity as well. We're talking about a fundamental shift in galactic power structures, Elena said. It won't happen overnight, and it won't happen without resistance from the Empire. But I think we've already passed the point of no return. Marcus looked at the displays showing dozens of species reaching out for contact, their messages filled with hope for the first time in generations. You know what the really crazy part is? This morning, I was worried about whether humanity would survive the day. Now we're talking about liberating half the galaxy. That's the thing about humans, Elena said with a smile. We don't think small. The communication system chimed again, and Admiral Chan looked at something off camera. Dr. Vasquez, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Imperial Council. They want to establish a direct diplomatic channel for ongoing negotiations. Any idea what they want to discuss? Unknown, but they're requesting Ambassador Chen's presence for a private meeting. No recording devices, no other witnesses. Marcus frowned. That doesn't sound good. Or, Elena said thoughtfully, it sounds like they want to discuss something they can't afford to have become public knowledge. Admiral Chen nodded. My thoughts exactly. Ambassador, are you willing to take the meeting? Marcus finished his coffee and stood up. Absolutely. After today, I'm curious to see what the Empire thinks is worth a secret conversation. As he prepared to leave, Elena caught his arm. Marcus, be careful. Today we showed them our strength, but we also showed them that we're not interested in destroying them. That makes us valuable as allies, but it also makes us dangerous as enemies. They might be thinking about ways to neutralize the threat we represent. Or, Marcus said with a grin, they might be thinking about ways to join us instead of fighting us. As he headed for the shuttle bay, Marcus reflected on how much had changed in a single day. This morning, humanity was an unknown species facing extinction. Tonight, they were potentially the architects of a new galactic order. Either way, it was going to be an interesting conversation. The private meeting room aboard the Imperial flagship Dominion was nothing like the Grand Council chamber where humanity had announced their existence to the galaxy. This space was small, intimate, and stark. A simple table, for chairs, and walls lined with signal-dampening materials that would prevent any electronic surveillance. Marcus Chen sat across from the Emperor's voice, but the ancient being looked different in this setting. Without the pageantry of his throne room, without the floating platforms and ceremonial lighting, he seemed smaller. More vulnerable. His skin had settled into a steady silver gray, a color Marcus's briefing material said indicated deep thought and uncertainty. Thank you for coming, the voice said, his harmonic speech pattern simplified in this private setting. I wanted to speak with you away from the formal diplomatic protocols. I appreciate the invitation, Marcus replied, setting his briefcase on the floor but keeping his newspaper folded on the table. Though I have to admit, I'm curious about what requires this level of secrecy. The voice was quiet for a moment, his skin shifting through subtle color variations that Marcus recognized as emotional processing. Finally, he spoke. I need to understand something that has been troubling me since our encounter this morning. Your species demonstrated military capabilities that far exceed our intelligence estimates. You revealed intelligence networks that have operated undetected for centuries. You coordinated a galactic-scale operation that our best military minds considered impossible. Marcus nodded. All of that is accurate. But, here's what I don't understand. If humanity possessed these capabilities, why did you wait for us to threaten you? Why not simply announce your presence and demand recognition from a position of strength? Marcus leaned back in his chair, considering how to answer. That's an interesting question. May I ask you something in return? Of course. In your 3,000 years of expansion, how many species has the Empire encountered that could have resisted your conquest but chose not to? The voice's skin flickered with brief flashes of color. None. Every species capable of resistance fought us immediately. Those that could not resist submitted immediately. Exactly. Which is why you don't understand our approach. Marcus unfolded his newspaper and glanced at the front page. Humans think differently about power and how to use it. How so? Marcus found the article he'd been reading earlier about the high school basketball championship and smiled. Tell me, what do you know about human history before we developed faster than light travel? Very little. Our intelligence focused on your current capabilities, not your past. We spent most of our recorded history fighting each other. Wars, conquests, empires rising and falling. For thousands of years, the human approach to problem solving was fundamentally military. If you had a problem, you found someone to fight about it. The voice's harmonies became questioning. But that doesn't explain your current restraint. Actually, it does. See, all that fighting taught us something important about the nature of power. Military force is excellent for destroying things, but it's terrible at building them. Conquest is easy. Governance is hard. Marcus turned to a different page of the newspaper, one showing local election results. About 300 years ago, humanity started experimenting with a different approach. Instead of forcing cooperation through conquest, we started building systems that made cooperation more valuable than conflict. I'm not following. Marcus set the newspaper aside and activated a small holographic projector similar to the one Elena had used earlier. The device showed a simplified map of human colonial expansion. When we first developed FTL travel, some humans wanted to do exactly what you suggested. Announce our presence, stake out territory, build fleets to defend it. Classic empire building. The display showed potential expansion patterns, aggressive territorial claims marked in red. But other humans pointed out that this approach had never worked well for us in the past. Every human empire in our history eventually collapsed because they focused on control instead of cooperation. The display changed, showing a different pattern of expansion. Instead of solid territorial blocks, human settlements formed networks connected by trade routes and communication lines. So we tried something different. Instead of claiming territory, we built relationships. Instead of demanding submission, we offered services. Instead of ruling through fear, we made ourselves useful. The voice's skin shifted to a deep blue that Marcus's briefing said indicated intense concentration. Useful how? Well, for example, humans are very good at fixing problems. Give us a broken piece of technology, and we'll figure out how to make it work better than it did originally. Give us a logistical challenge, and we'll design a more efficient solution. Give us a scientific mystery, and we'll experiment until we understand it. Marcus gestured to the hologram, which now showed the actual history of human expansion. Tiny settlements that gradually grew into major installations, research stations that became economic hubs, mining operations that turned into thriving communities. Over time, imperial authorities started to rely on human settlements to solve problems they couldn't handle themselves. Unusual technical challenges, complex logistical situations, research projects that required creative thinking. And you used that dependence to build your intelligence network. We used it to build something more valuable than an intelligence network. We built trust. Marcus's expression became more serious. For over 2 centuries, humans have been solving problems for imperial citizens, conducting honest research, providing reliable services. We built a reputation as a species that keeps its word and delivers on its commitments. The voice's harmonies became thoughtful. Which made you invisible as a threat. Exactly. When Imperial security assessed human activities, they saw useful allies, not potential enemies. Our installations were welcomed because they provided real value. Our people were trusted because we had proven our reliability over generations. Marcus reactivated the hologram, showing the current scope of human operations throughout Imperial space. This wasn't deception. The services we provided were genuine, the research we conducted was valid, the problems we solved were real. We just happened to be building our own infrastructure at the same time. But why? The voice asked. If your goal was independence, why not simply claim remote territory and develop it openly? Marcus was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Because independence was never our goal. Survival was. The voice's skin shifted to a pale yellow that indicated surprise. Think about it from our perspective, Marcus continued. We're surrounded by an empire that has never encountered a species it couldn't conquer or destroy. We have no idea what your long-term intentions are toward species like ours. We don't know if you'll decide we're useful enough to keep around, or if you'll eventually conclude that we're too dangerous to tolerate. Marcus stood and walked to the room's single window, looking out at the stars. So we prepared for the worst-case scenario. We built the capability to defend ourselves if necessary, while simultaneously building relationships that would make conflict less likely. We created a situation where attacking humanity would be expensive and difficult, while cooperating with humanity was profitable and beneficial. Until today. Until today, Marcus agreed, returning to his seat. When you decided that human expansion had to be stopped permanently. The voice's harmonies became discordant. That was not my decision alone. The council reviewed intelligence reports indicating that human growth was accelerating beyond acceptable parameters. What parameters? Population projections showed humanity reaching 50 billion individuals within a century. Territorial analysis suggested human expansion could encompass over 1,000 star systems within the same timeframe. Marcus nodded. Those projections are probably accurate. Maybe conservative. A species with that growth rate and your demonstrated technological capabilities would eventually challenge imperial hegemony. Only if we wanted to. Marcus leaned forward. This is the part you're not understanding. Humans don't want to rule the galaxy. We want to explore it. He reactivated the hologram, showing human expansion patterns again. Look at how we've been growing. We don't conquer systems, we settle them. We don't strip resources, we develop sustainable extraction. We don't eliminate local species, we study them and learn from them. The display showed dozens of systems where humans had established colonies alongside existing ecosystems and even other sapient species. Our expansion isn't about conquest. It's about curiosity. Humans want to see what's out there, learn how things work, understand how the universe fits together. The voice's skin flickered through several rapid color changes. But expansion of that scale would inevitably lead to territorial conflicts. Only if territory is treated as exclusive. But what if it isn't? Marcus adjusted the hologram to show a different view of human settlements. Humans are very good at living in places other species consider uninhabitable. Gas giant moons, asteroid fields, deep space installations. We can expand without taking anything away from anyone else. That cannot account for all of your projected growth. No, you're right. Eventually we would want to establish colonies on habitable worlds. But habitable is a relative term. The display showed Earth's colonial projections, including worlds that imperial surveys had classified as marginal or unsuitable for most species. Humans evolved on a world that's considered hostile by galactic standards. High gravity, aggressive weather patterns, significant geological instability. Most imperial species need extensive terraforming to live comfortably on worlds like that. Marcus smiled. But humans thrive in those environments. We can colonize worlds that other species can't use, develop resources that other species can't access, solve problems that other species can't handle. The voice was quiet for a long moment. You're proposing a model of galactic expansion based on specialization rather than competition. I'm proposing that conflict isn't inevitable if different species focus on what they do best instead of trying to do everything themselves. Marcus turned to a new section of his newspaper, one featuring an article about international cooperation on Earth. Here's what I think the Empire is missing. You've been successful for 3,000 years because you're very good at military conquest and political control. But you've never had to be good at anything else, because you could just take whatever you needed from conquered species. That system has provided stability and prosperity for quadrillions of beings. Has it? Or has it provided stability and prosperity for imperial citizens at the expense of everyone else? Marcus looked up from the newspaper. How many species have been strip-mined out of existence to fuel imperial expansion? How many civilizations have been erased because they didn't fit imperial needs? The voice's skin darkened to deep gray. Imperial expansion has always involved costs. And those costs are getting higher, aren't they? The easy conquests are done. The remaining independent species are either too difficult to conquer or too worthless to bother with. The Empire has reached the limits of what it can achieve through force. Marcus set the newspaper aside and focused his full attention on the voice. That's why you're really here, isn't it? Not just to understand humanity's capabilities, but to understand whether there's an alternative to the path the Empire is on. The silence stretched for several minutes. Finally, the voice spoke, his harmonies soft and uncertain. The Empire's growth has been stagnating for the past century. Military expansion has become prohibitively expensive. Colonial development costs exceed colonial profits in most sectors. Internal stability requires increasing military presence to suppress independence movements. And the Imperial Council is starting to wonder if there's a better way. Some members have expressed curiosity about alternative approaches to governance and expansion. Marcus smiled. Such as the human model of voluntary cooperation and mutual benefit. The human model appears to achieve sustainable growth without the military and administrative costs associated with forced expansion. It does. But it requires giving up something the Empire has never been willing to sacrifice. Which is control. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Voluntary cooperation means that your partners can choose to stop cooperating. Mutual benefit means that both sides have to actually benefit. You can't just take what you want and ignore the consequences. The voice's skin shifted to a pale purple that indicated deep consideration. What would this look like in practice? If the Empire were to experiment with alternative approaches to expansion? Marcus was quiet for a moment, realizing that this conversation had just shifted from diplomatic contact to something much more significant. Well, hypothetically, you could start by offering genuine partnership to species that are currently resisting imperial expansion. Instead of demanding submission, you could offer cooperation. Instead of imposed governance, you could propose mutual defense treaties. And what would prevent these partners from simply taking imperial assistance and, then, pursuing their own interests? The same thing that prevents humanity from betraying its partners. It's not in our long-term interest to do so. Marcus gestured to the hologram showing human networks throughout imperial space. Look at what we've built by being reliable partners. Access to thousands of star systems, cooperative relationships with hundreds of species, intelligence networks that span the galaxy. We have all of this because people trust us to keep our word. But, if we offered partnership to current resistance movements, what would prevent them from demanding reparations for past imperial actions? Marcus considered this carefully. Some of them probably would demand reparations. And, honestly, they might deserve them. But, others would be more interested in building a better future than settling old scores. How could we identify which approach different species would take? Start with species that have something to gain from cooperation. Species with valuable resources or strategic locations who need protection or technological assistance. Species that are currently facing threats that imperial partnership could help address. Marcus stood again, this time moving to activate his own small holographic display. The thing is, this isn't theoretical anymore. Today's events have already started changing how other species view both humanity and the Empire. We're receiving diplomatic inquiries from dozens of species that want to explore.